Why high-achieving women still feel like frauds, the psychology no one explains. The more you accomplish, the worse that fraud feeling gets, am I right? You'd think it would work the other way. You would think that with every win, every promotion, everything you pull off that you weren't sure you could pull off, the voice that says, you don't actually belong here, would get a little quieter. But for most high-achieving women, it gets louder, and there's a specific psychological reason for that. Hi, I'm Cara Loewentheil. I'm a former Harvard-trained lawyer, New York Times bestselling author of Unfuck Your Brain, and a master certified life coach. I've spent over a decade working with high-achieving women, and the pattern I just described is one of the most consistent things I see. Women who have genuinely impressive track records, women who have done hard things, women who by any external measure have proven themselves repeatedly, and yet they still feel like they aren't really deserving of being where they are, or that they could be rejected and cast out for any small misstep. Not despite their success, but in some ways because of it. So that's what I'm going to explain today. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why high achievers specifically get hit harder by this than almost anyone else, why your success has actually been making the feeling worse without you realizing it, and what you can do differently that doesn't involve burning out, chasing more accomplishments, while hoping the feeling eventually magically goes away. Let's start with the thing that confuses people the most about this pattern. If imposter syndrome were simply about lacking evidence of competence, it would resolve as the evidence accumulated. You'd get the degree, land the job, deliver the results, and at some point your brain would say, okay, case closed, you belong here. But that's not what happens. And the reason is that imposter syndrome was never really about evidence. Your brain is actually a threat detection system. When it perceives something as a threat, it locks on, scans, analyzes, and refuses to release until it feels safe. This is the most important feature your brain has in some ways. It's the thing that has kept human beings alive for hundreds of thousands of years. The part that creates the problem is that girls are taught that being liked matters, that social consequences are real, that being too much or making the wrong impression is a risk to their happiness and success. That training is layered in for long enough and goes deep enough that your brain files how I am perceived under the category of threat. So when you walk into a high stakes room and your brain starts running, what if they figure out I don't know enough? That's actually your threat detection system doing its job. If you're someone who's built a significant track record of success, your brain has also spent years building a very particular case, which goes a little something like this. The reason I've gotten this far is that I work harder than everyone else. I prepare more thoroughly than everyone else, and I do not let things slip. Control and perfection and constantly being available are what keep me safe. For many high-achieving women, that strategy has genuinely worked for a while. It's produced results. It got you to the room that you're in now. But what it also did was build a system where your sense of safety is entirely dependent on performing at an impossibly high level at all times. Which means anytime you feel uncertain, any situation where you don't know the answer, any opportunity that feels like a stretch and has a risk of failure, your brain reads as a direct threat. Because if the strategy fails, according to your brain's logic, everything you've built could fall apart overnight. There's a specific mechanism that makes success make this worse over time. Every time you succeed, you don't just add a win to your record, you also raise the stakes of being exposed. Early in your career, being found out would have been embarrassing, but almost no one would even have known or noticed. But now you have a reputation, a position, people who look to you, an identity built around being competent and capable. Your brain thinks that the potential consequences of being exposed as a fraud have grown in proportion to everything you've built. Now, your brain is ignoring that you also have a track record, relationships, and proven success, which means you actually have a lot more cushioning to absorb a mistake in reality. But your brain ignores all of that. It only looks at the risk, which seems like it's getting bigger and bigger. So the alarm gets louder and louder. And this is why the women who come to me with the most severe imposter syndrome are often the most accomplished. The feeling scales with the achievement, and no amount of additional achievement changes that math because it just keeps scaling. At some point in your life, being smart and capable stopped being just something you did and became how you identify your own value. Your competence became load-bearing. It became the thing your sense of self rests on. And when that happens, any perceived threat to your competence stops being just uncomfortable. It becomes existential feeling. Because your brain is reading it as, if I'm not competent, if I'm not excellent, if I'm not perfect, I'm not okay. If I don't know the answer, I'm not safe. If someone sees a gap in my thinking or my knowledge, something important about who I am is at risk. And this is why that fraud feeling in high achievers can hit differently than ordinary self-doubt, right? Ordinary self-doubt is just saying, I might not be good enough at this thing. But the high achiever imposter syndrome says, I might not be who I've built my entire identity around being. And that second version is much more terrifying. And a terrified brain does not respond to reassurance. It responds by doubling down on the strategy it believes has kept it safe so far, which is work harder, prepare more, control everything, be constantly available, and don't let anyone see the gaps. The brain you use to succeed is the same brain giving you the thoughts of, I don't deserve this success, or I'm only where I am today because people were nice to me or gave me a chance. The analytical mind, the one that's always scanning for what could go wrong and anticipating problems and preparing for every possible outcome, that's also the mind that turns on you when there's no external problem to solve. High achievers are often stuck with an exceptionally good threat detector that has been pointed inward. So you're not more anxious than other people because something's wrong with you or because you should be more anxious. You have a high-performance brain doing what high-performance brains do when the threat is internal rather than external. So if you've ever thought, I'm just an overthinker, or I've always been this way, or this is just how my brain works, I want you to consider that you're describing a learned pattern in an extremely capable brain. But learned patterns can be changed. So if you want to go deeper on what imposter syndrome actually is at the root and where it comes from, I have a full video on that. It walks through the specific thought patterns driving the feeling and why the standard advice of fake it till you make it or remember your accomplishments don't actually work. I'll link it in the description and in the cards above. It's worth watching alongside this one because they cover different pieces of the same problem. Even when you understand intellectually that achievement doesn't fix the fraud feeling, the pull to go back to the achievement strategy is incredibly strong. You know cognitively that another accomplishment or credential will not quiet that voice, but you still want to go get it anyway because it temporarily works. Not permanently, but temporarily. Every time you accomplish something, you get a window of relief. The alarm is silenced. Your brain registers, okay, we're safe. So you do feel relief, and your brain, which is a very efficient learning machine, catalogs that and files it under things that work. But the problem is that relief does not last because the underlying thought hasn't changed. That thought, some version of I might be exposed, I might not be enough, my position is fragile, is still there. And thoughts that haven't been addressed directly don't just disappear. They just lurk. So you get the win, you feel better for a while, but then the thought comes up again. The alarm goes off again. And now you're looking for the next thing that will quiet it. So you get the win, you feel better for a while, but then the thought resurfaces, the alarm goes off again, and you go looking for the next thing that will quiet it. And this is what happens when you keep treating a thought problem like it's an evidence or a circumstance or achievement problem. Because the achievement strategy has a ceiling. At some point, you run out of credentials to collect, or you burn out trying to collect them. You're already at the top of the room, or you've had to leave the room because you burnt out. But that fraud feeling is still there, and now there's nowhere to go with it. And that is when a lot of women end up in my programs. Because everything they've done, everything the achievement strategy told them to do, hasn't delivered the internal result it promised. They're looking for what comes after, just do more, and eventually you'll feel good. What comes after is actually changing the thoughts that are driving that behavior. And before you check out on me, I am not talking about affirmations or vibrations. Affirmations don't work for this, and there's a specific reason why. Your brain has a built-in fact checker. When you tell it something it doesn't believe, it pulls up the file of contradicting evidence and rejects the statement. You can't positive think your way out of a deeply held belief. What actually changes a belief is working with your brain's fact checker rather than trying to override it or trick it. Building a sequence of thoughts that are each slightly more believable than the last one, so your brain can follow the path without rejecting it at every step. That way you gradually loosen the grip of the thought rather than trying to flip it all at once. That's the work, and it's learnable. This is a skill. It's not a magic trick or a trait you're born with. Confidence is not something you either have or don't. It's something you build deliberately by learning how to work with your own brain. What I'm describing starts with understanding the specific thoughts driving the pattern. And a big piece of that is understanding why you care so much about how you're perceived in the first place. I've got a guide called How to Stop Caring What Other People Think that walks through exactly that. It's practical, it's grounded in the same framework I've been talking about, and it's a good first step into doing this work, not just listening to it. You can grab it at unfuckyourbrain.com/caring. The link is in the description below. The feeling of fraud, it's generated by a thought. So your job is to find the specific thought because you can't change what you haven't identified. Most high-achieving women are so practiced at pushing through the feeling and getting back to work that they never actually slow down long enough to find the thought underneath it. They feel the alarm, they respond to the alarm by doing more, and they never ask themselves, what is the belief generating this and how can I change it? So the first practice is simple, even if it's not easy. The next time that feeling shows up, the waiting to be found out feeling, the who am I to be here feeling, the I got lucky and eventually people will notice the feeling, don't just push through it. Get curious about it. Ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Write it down. You're looking for something specific. Usually it's one of a few core beliefs. I don't know enough to be here. My success isn't earned, or my success has been from working hard, not being talented. If they really knew how uncertain I feel, they'd question whether I belong. The stakes are too high for me to get this wrong. This is not an exhaustive list, but you're looking for what the thought is for you. So find the thought and then ask yourself, what would be a slightly more believable thought than this one? You're not trying to go from I'm a fraud to I'm brilliant and should be the master of everything. Your brain won't take that leap. You're looking for the next rung, a thought that's a little more grounded, a little more accurate, that your brain can actually hold on to. I've navigated uncertainty in situations like this before. Or feeling uncertain and being unqualified are not the same thing. Or other people who genuinely belong in this room also have moments of not knowing. Each of those is a smaller, more believable shift. And smaller, more believable shifts are what actually create change over time because they work with your brain's fact check system rather than against it. If this is resonating and you want to go deeper on the practical side of changing these thoughts, my video on the 3 ways to actually change negative thoughts walks through the specific tools in detail, including why some approaches work and others don't, and which ones you need to use. That one is linked at the end of this video. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that now. We've got new videos every week on the psychology behind confidence, self-doubt, speaking up, and what it actually takes to change the way your brain works.